Another difference is how time is spent, especially when it comes to financial growth. Most people underestimate how closely time and money are connected. They think money only comes from working harder or longer. But in reality, money often comes from how you think, what you know, and how you use your time when you're not working. Many people spend most of their free time consuming. Scrolling through social media, watching videos, switching from one piece of content to another, filling their time with things that are entertaining but not improving their financial situation. 1 hour turns into 3. 3 hours turns into a habit. And over weeks, months, and years, that habit quietly keeps them in the same place financially. It's not obvious at first. It feels normal. It feels harmless. But the cost is hidden. Because while time is being spent consuming, it's not being used to learn skills, understand money, or create new opportunities. People who improve their financial situation don't necessarily have more time. They just use it differently. They make intentional choices. They decide to spend part of their time learning about money, how to manage it, how to grow it, how to protect it. They read about budgeting, saving, investing, and building income. They listen to ideas that expand their thinking. They don't do this perfectly every day. But they do it consistently. Even 1 hour a day, focused on learning something valuable about money, can completely change your life over time. Because knowledge compounds. And when knowledge compounds, better decisions follow. So instead of just asking how much free time you have, ask yourself a more important question. What is my time turning into? Is it turning into growth, or is it disappearing without impact? Because time, when used intentionally, can eventually turn into income, opportunities, and financial stability. But when wasted, it becomes regret. Another major difference is mindset, especially when it comes to money. Some people grow up believing that money is difficult, confusing, or out of reach. They hear things like, money is hard to earn, or rich people are just lucky, or that kind of life isn't for us. Over time, those beliefs become internal. They start saying things like, I'm just not good with money, or I'll never get ahead, or no matter what I do, nothing changes. And once those thoughts become beliefs, they start affecting behavior. They stop trying to learn. They avoid financial decisions. They don't take opportunities seriously. Because deep down, they don't believe change is possible. But people who improve financially think differently. They may start with the same struggles, the same confusion, the same lack of knowledge, but they believe they can learn. They believe they can improve. Instead of saying, I can't afford this, they begin asking, what would it take for me to afford this? Instead of saying, I don't understand money, they think, I can learn how money works. Instead of avoiding financial responsibility, they move toward it. And that shift changes everything. Because when you believe you can improve, you start taking action. You start tracking your money. You start paying attention to where it goes. You start making adjustments. And slowly, your financial situation begins to change. Your mindset doesn't just affect how you feel about money, it affects what you do with it. And what you do with it determines your future. Another key difference is how income is viewed and handled. Many people rely entirely on one source of income. Usually a job. They work a certain number of hours, receive a paycheck, and use that money to cover their expenses. There's nothing wrong with this. It's where most people start. But the problem is when it stays the only strategy. Because when income depends only on time, there's always a limit. There are only so many hours in a day. There's only so much energy you can give. And if something happens, if hours are reduced, if work stops, income stops too. This creates pressure. It creates stress. It creates dependence on a single source. People who build wealth think beyond that. They don't just ask how to earn money. They ask how to multiply it. They look for ways to create additional streams of income, even if they start small. It might begin with a side skill. A small business idea. Selling something online. Learning a skill that can increase their earning potential. Over time, those small efforts can grow into something bigger. And as those income streams grow, something important happens. Dependence decreases. Options increase. Freedom becomes possible. Because now, money is coming from more than one place. And eventually, they begin to shift from only working for money to also having money work for them. That's where real financial change begins. Fear is another factor that keeps people financially stuck. Fear of losing money. Fear of making the wrong decision. Fear of trying something new and failing. Because of that fear, many people avoid financial opportunities completely. They don't invest. They don't start. They don't try. They stay in what feels safe even if that safe situation is not helping them grow. But there's something important to understand. Doing nothing also has a cost. When you don't grow your income, inflation reduces your purchasing power. When you don't learn, opportunities pass by. When you don't act, nothing changes. People who improve financially don't ignore fear. But they don't let it control their decisions. They take time to learn. They start small. They make careful, informed choices. And yes, sometimes they make mistakes. But instead of seeing those mistakes as failures, they see them as lessons. They ask, what can I learn from this? Because every mistake, every wrong move, every setback adds experience. And experience makes future decisions better. Over time, fear becomes smaller, and confidence becomes stronger. Your environment also has a strong influence on your financial life. If you're surrounded by people who spend impulsively, avoid saving, and believe that building wealth is impossible, those habits start to feel normal. Without realizing it, you begin to think the same way. You start to justify poor financial decisions. You start to accept limitations. You start to settle. But when you're exposed to people who are financially disciplined, who talk about growth, who are trying to improve their situation, your mindset begins to shift. You start hearing different conversations. You start seeing different habits. You start thinking differently about what's possible. And that exposure matters. Because your financial habits are often influenced by what you see regularly. This doesn't mean you need to cut people off. It means you need to be intentional about what influences you. What you listen to. What you watch. Who you learn from. Because those influences shape your decisions. Another habit that keeps people stuck financially is complaining instead of improving. It's easy to complain about not having enough money. It's easy to point out rising costs, limited opportunities, and difficult situations. And sometimes those concerns are real. But staying in that mindset doesn't change anything. Complaining doesn't increase income. It doesn't build savings. It doesn't create opportunities. People who improve financially shift their focus. Instead of asking why things are difficult, they ask what they can do. Instead of focusing only on problems, they start looking for solutions. Even small ones. They look for ways to reduce unnecessary spending. They look for ways to increase income, even slightly. They look for skills they can learn. Because progress doesn't come from talking about problems, it comes from taking action. And action, even small action, creates momentum. At the end of all this, the most important thing to understand is this. This isn't about labeling people. It's about recognizing financial habits and patterns that lead to certain outcomes. Because anyone can change their financial direction. You can start where you are. You can begin learning about money. You can start managing what you already have. You can build better habits step by step. You don't need to be perfect. You just need to be consistent. Because small financial improvements, repeated over time, lead to big changes. Saving a little consistently becomes savings. Learning a little consistently becomes knowledge. Earning a little more consistently becomes growth. And over time, those small steps create a completely different financial future. So take a moment and reflect honestly. How are you using your time when it comes to money? What do you believe about your financial future? What actions are you taking daily? Are your habits helping you build something, or keeping you in the same place? Because your financial future is not fixed. It's built. One decision at a time. One habit at a time. One day at a time. Some people stay in the same financial patterns for years. Others decide to change. And that decision changes everything. So the real question is not about poor people or rich people. The real question is about your choices. And what you decide to do next.